are moments in life when something happens that refuses to stay in the past. You move cities, change jobs, meet new people, but the memory remains, waiting quietly in the dark. This is one of those memories. Even now, years later, I still avoid silence at night, because sometimes, when everything is still, I remember the sound of laughter that did not belong to anything human. At the time, I was a college student living in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. The building was modern, recently built, and filled with other students. It was the last place you would expect anything strange to happen. The hallways were always lit, the walls were thin, and there was always someone awake somewhere. That sense of normality is probably why I ignored the warning signs at first. One winter night, I was lying in bed, half asleep, playing a game on my handheld console. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows, and distant traffic hummed through the city. Nothing felt unusual. I remember feeling calm, comfortable, completely unaware that something in the room was already watching me. I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. At first, I thought it was just light from a passing car, but the movement came again, slow and deliberate. I looked up from the screen toward the foot of my bed, and my body instantly froze. A woman was standing there. She was dressed entirely in black, her face pale, her expression empty. She wasn't transparent or shadowy. She looked completely real. For several seconds, neither of us moved. My mind struggled to understand what I was seeing. I told myself it had to be a dream, or exhaustion, or imagination. Slowly, without breaking eye contact, I reached for the light switch beside my bed and turned it on. The room filled with light. She did not disappear. She simply stood there, staring. Panic hit me all at once. I shouted and ran from the room, nearly falling as I rushed into the living area where my roommates were sitting. They followed me back immediately, expecting an intruder, but my room was empty. The windows were locked. Nothing was disturbed. They laughed it off, convinced I had imagined it. I laughed with them, but deep down, I knew I hadn't. Years passed, and life moved on. I eventually moved to The Hague for work, living alone in a small apartment near the edge of the city. Winters there felt long and quiet. The nights stretched endlessly, and the silence began to feel heavy. Wanting some company, I bought a bird from a weekend pet market. The seller promised it was intelligent and could learn to speak. The bird was beautiful, black-feathered, alert, and unusually calm. I named it Elias. It quickly grew comfortable around me, often sitting on my shoulder while I watched television or worked. But despite weeks of patience, it never spoke. It only watched. Always watching, as if waiting for something. The first time it laughed, I thought I imagined it. I was watching television late at night when the sound came from behind me. It started as a high, almost playful chuckle, then dropped into something rough and strained. The sound didn't feel natural. It sounded forced, like laughter being copied without understanding what laughter really was. Seconds later, there was violent banging on my front door. A maintenance worker burst in, shouting angrily in Dutch, and rushed to the balcony. Somehow, the outdoor tap had been turned fully open, flooding the balcony and pouring water down the building. The tap was twisted so tightly it took him several minutes to shut it off. Behind us, Elias laughed again. After that night, things began to change. Lights flickered without reason. Objects were no longer where I left them. The apartment felt different, as if someone else was present when I wasn't looking. The laughter always came before something strange happened. Always. One evening, a friend visiting from Amsterdam heard it too. We both watched in silence, as the volume knob on my stereo slowly turned by itself. First all the way up, blasting music into the room, then slowly back down to silence. Neither of us touched it. Neither of us spoke about it afterward. Sleep became difficult. Some nights I would wake to the sound of laughter coming from the living room. Other nights, the bird would stare into empty corners, feathers raised, as though reacting to movement I couldn't see. The apartment no longer felt like mine. It felt occupied. The worst night came when I brought someone home with me. She was afraid of birds, so I locked Elias in his cage and covered it with a thick blanket. We went to bed, but the laughter continued, muffled yet unmistakable, coming through the door. She complained of a sudden headache and an overwhelming feeling that someone else was in the apartment. We woke to loud banging on the bedroom door. Someone was outside. My heart raced as I grabbed the nearest heavy object and opened it. The hallway was empty. Then I looked down. Elias stood at my feet, silent and still. The cage door behind him was still locked. That was when I decided the bird had to go. The final night before giving it away, I heard the laughter again, louder than ever. I lay in bed, frozen, waiting for something to happen. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me into sleep. I woke suddenly to the sound of my bedroom door slamming shut. Someone was standing beside my bed. It was the same woman I had seen years before in Rotterdam. But this time she looked terrified. Her mouth moved quickly, as if trying to warn me, but no sound came out. She turned and ran from the room. I followed, turning on every light I passed, but she vanished into nothing. The bird cage was empty. The laughter came from behind me. I turned slowly. Elias sat calmly on top of the lamp, watching me. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I gave the bird to a friend and left as quickly as possible. As I reached the door, I heard a quiet voice behind me. Clear, human, close to my ear. "I'll miss you." Then the laughter returned, louder than ever. A few months later, the bird escaped from my friend's home and was never found again. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I still hear that sound in my dreams. And I can't help wondering if the bird ever truly learned to speak, or if something else had been learning how to sound human all along. Some places do not feel wrong at first. They feel quiet, ordinary, safe even. And then, slowly, almost patiently, something changes. The silence becomes heavier. The shadows seem to last longer than they should. And before you realize it, you begin to feel watched in your own home. That was how it started for me, in a house just outside York. Last autumn, after several difficult years away, I moved back in with my father. He had recently remarried, and they were living in an old timber house built at the edge of open countryside, where the city lights faded into fields and woodland. The house itself wasn't ancient, but it had been expanded over time, room added to room, until the layout felt confusing, almost maze-like at night. At first, I blamed everything on adjustment. Returning home after years away felt strange enough on its own. The house creaked constantly, especially when the wind rolled in from the moors. My father worked late shifts, and many evenings I found myself alone in a house that suddenly felt far too large for one person. I told myself the unease was just nerves. I moved into what used to be my stepbrother's old bedroom. From the first night, sleep became difficult. There was nothing visibly wrong with the room, yet every time I lay down, I felt as if someone was standing just outside my view, not watching with curiosity, but with intention. After a week of sleepless nights, I switched rooms, and strangely, the feeling faded. Not completely, but enough for me to ignore it. Then the noises began. The first incident happened late at night while I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through videos online. Without warning, everything in the room rattled violently. The television shook against the wall, the shelves trembled, and the glass in the cabinet vibrated loudly. It lasted only a second before stopping completely. No passing trucks, no earthquake, just silence afterward, thick and uncomfortable. Over the following days, the sensation of being watched returned, stronger than before. It felt localized at first, always near the dining table or the hallway leading toward the older part of the house. I would catch myself glancing over my shoulder constantly, convinced someone was standing there. Each time, of course, there was nothing. The footsteps started about a week later. At first they sounded distant, like someone walking slowly across wooden floors in another part of the house. I assumed it was the structure settling or pipes expanding in the cold, but the sounds became clearer, heavy, deliberate steps, always at night, always when I was alone, and eventually they began to follow me from room to room. One evening, while working at my laptop, the footsteps approached from behind. They stopped directly behind my chair. I remember holding my breath, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. But when I went upstairs to bed, the same footsteps began climbing the stairs moments later. They stopped outside my door. I did not open it. Things escalated when my father and his wife left town for a weekend. The house felt different without them. Quieter, but not peaceful. The air felt tense, as if something was aware that I was alone. Late that night, a loud crash came from a sitting area filled with old furniture and photographs belonging to deceased relatives. My cat bolted from the room, fur raised, hissing at nothing. When I investigated, I found an antique brass ornament lying in the middle of the floor. It had been resting securely on a shelf earlier that day. I convinced myself it must have slipped. Still, I slept with the lights on that night. The turning point came unexpectedly. One evening, after picking up my father's wife from a gathering, she became unusually emotional. As soon as we entered the house, she began talking about things she had never mentioned before. She described feeling trapped in certain rooms, unable to move, convinced something hostile was nearby. She said the house felt like a doorway, and that sometimes she believed more than one presence existed there. I hadn't told her anything about my experiences. After that conversation, the activity intensified. Sleep became nearly impossible. I heard tapping against windows even when there was no wind. Shadows seemed to move independently of light. More than once, I caught reflections in glass surfaces that didn't match the empty room behind me. One night, exhausted, I fell asleep on the sofa. Sometime after midnight, I woke to the sensation of movement nearby. In the reflection of the patio door, I saw the outline of a man walking slowly across the room. When I turned around, nothing was there. But in the reflection, he continued moving. The worst moment came in the kitchen a few nights later. I was cooking late, trying to distract myself. My cat suddenly froze, staring at a point directly behind me. Its body tensed, fur standing on end. I felt a wave of pure dread wash over me, the overwhelming certainty that something was standing inches away. The cat's expression changed into something I had never seen before, not aggression, but fear. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then the feeling vanished as suddenly as it arrived. Later that night, another loud bang echoed from the old sitting area. Nothing had fallen, nothing had moved, yet the house felt satisfied, as if something had made itself known. Since then, the activity has slowed, not stopped, just quieter, waiting. Sometimes I still hear footsteps when the house is empty. Sometimes my cat refuses to enter certain rooms. And sometimes, late at night, I wake up with the strong feeling that someone is standing in the doorway, watching, waiting for me to notice. Haven't moved out yet, but I no longer believe that whatever is in that house arrived recently. I think it was already there, and I think it knows I can feel it. Sometimes I wonder if the presence only became active because someone new moved into the house, or if it was simply waiting for someone who could finally notice it. If you were living there, would you stay and try to understand what it wants, or would you leave immediately and never look back? And be honest, have you ever felt something watching you when you knew you were completely alone? I read every comment, because stories like this make you question whether these things are truly rare, or just rarely talked about.